When you really stop and look around, the sheer variety of life on this planet is just staggering. I mean, from the tiniest microbe to the biggest whale, we are surrounded by this incredible, beautiful, and kind of chaotic web of organisms. So the big question is, how on earth do we even start to make sense of it all? Well, let's just try to wrap our heads around the scale here. Right now, scientists have identified and officially named somewhere around 1.8 million different species. And get this, that's probably just a tiny fraction of what's actually out there. We're talking about a mind-boggling amount of life. So you see the problem. It's like being handed a library with millions and millions of books, but none of them have titles or authors. There's no Dewey Decimal System, no catalog, nothing. Just beautiful, chaotic life. How do you even begin to sort through that? First things first, before we can even think about organizing our library, we have to figure out what exactly counts as a book. In our case, what actually makes something alive? It sounds like a simple question, right? But you'd be surprised how fuzzy that line can get. Okay, so what about growth? That seems like a good place to start. Living things definitely grow, but it's how they grow that's the key. You see, a plant grows from the inside, by its cells dividing and multiplying. A mountain, on the other hand, it grows by just accumulating more rock and dust on the outside. So growth alone, it's not a foolproof test. All right, fine. How about reproduction? That feels like a fundamental part of life. But there's a catch. Think about a mule. It's the offspring of a horse and a donkey. It's 100% alive, but it can't reproduce. It's sterile. Same goes for worker bees. So even reproduction has some major exceptions. This brings us to something that is absolutely non-negotiable for all life. And that word is metabolism. You can think of it as the engine of life. It's all the chemical reactions constantly happening inside an organism, taking in energy and matter and using it to build and maintain itself. A rock doesn't do that. A computer doesn't do that. Only life does. So when you boil it all down, biologists generally agree on 3 core features that define life. Number 1, metabolism, that internal engine we just talked about. Number 2, cellular organization. Every single living thing we know of is made of cells. And number 3, consciousness. Now, this doesn't mean thinking, it just means the ability to sense what's going on around you and react to it. If it checks all 3 boxes, it's alive. Awesome. So we've figured out what's going into our biological library. Now we tackle the next huge problem. How do we give every single one of those 1.8 million organisms a unique name that a scientist in Brazil and a scientist in Japan can both understand instantly? Because before we had a system, things were a total mess. For example, to identify one particular plant, you might have had to say something like Caryophyllum sexatilis follis gramineus umbellatus corymbates.
Yeah, exactly. It was basically a paragraph-long description in Latin. It was a nightmare.
This chaos led everyone to the same conclusion. Biology needed a single, standardized system. The goal was simple. One organism, one name. And that name should mean the same thing to everyone, everywhere on the planet. No more confusion. And here comes the hero of our story, a Swedish botanist named Carolus Linnaeus. Back in the 1700s, he came up with a system that was so elegant and so simple it's still used today. He called it binomial nomenclature. Binomial literally just means 2 names. And this is the magic of it. Remember that absurdly long name from before? Well, using Linnaeus's system, we get this. The scientific name for a mango tree is simply Mangifera indica. That's it. 2 words, simple, elegant, and universal. It was a total game changer. The whole system works because of 4 simple universal rules. 1, every name has 2 parts. The first is the genus, kind of like a family name. And the second is the species, the specific individual name. 2, the names are in Latin or they're Latinized. Why? Because Latin is a dead language, it doesn't change over time. 3, you always write them in italics, or if you're handwriting, you underline them. And 4, the genus name gets a capital letter, but the species name doesn't. Simple as that. Okay, let's recap. We've defined what life is, we've given every living thing a unique two-part name. So what's the last piece of the puzzle? It's organizing our library. How do we arrange all these named organisms on the shelves so that it all makes sense? This giant organizational project has an official name. It's called taxonomy. And taxonomy is simply the science of classification. It's the process of looking at all these organisms and grouping them into logical categories, which are called taxa, based on what they have in common. To do this, taxonomists use what's called the Linnaean hierarchy. The best way to think about it is like a mailing address. You start super broad with the kingdom, that's like the country. Then you get more specific with phylum, then class, order, family, genus, all the way down to species, which is like the exact street address for that one organism. And here is the most important rule of this whole system. As you move down that hierarchy from kingdom to species, the organisms in each group share more and more and more in common. For example, the animal kingdom includes everything from sponges to eagles. But if you go down to the class Mammalia, well, now everything has fur or hair and produces milk. Go all the way down to the species Homo sapiens, and the similarities get very specific. Let's look at a couple of real-world examples. Take us, humans, and a common housefly. We're both in the animal kingdom, sure, but that's pretty much where the similarities stop at that high level. We branch off immediately at the next step, phylum. Humans are in phylum Chordata, we have backbones. Houseflies are in phylum Arthropoda, they're insects with exoskeletons. This system gives every living thing a totally unique address in the tree of life. So, we've gone through all of this, defining, naming, organizing. You might be thinking, okay, that's a neat system for scientists, but why does it actually matter? What's the point of all this hard work? Why build this giant library of life in the first place? Is it just about being tidy? Absolutely not. This system is completely fundamental to how we understand and interact with the natural world. Think about it. Taxonomy is how we map out evolutionary relationships. It's vital for agriculture. If we want to improve a crop, we look for its wild relatives. It's how we find new bioresources, like plants that could produce life-saving medicines. And most importantly, how can we even begin to talk about conserving biodiversity if we don't know what's out there and how it's all connected? And this isn't just some dusty old corner of science. One of the absolute giants of 20th century biology, Ernst Mayr, often called the Darwin of the 20th century, he argued that the diversity of species is the central question of all evolutionary biology. This classification system is the language we use to answer that question. So our biological library is incredible. It holds almost 2 million known books. But so many of the shelves are still empty, so many of the books we do have haven't even been fully read yet. Which leaves us with a pretty amazing thought. Out there, in the deepest oceans, the densest jungles, maybe even in our own backyards, what new chapters in the astonishing story of life are just waiting for us to discover?